troops and NATO troops going into Hungary, Slovakia, and Poland. Isn't that great? Isn't that great? And here's the best thing. These arrogant boys haven't won a war since World War II, killed tens of millions of people, and now we got another strategy to defeat the Russians? Oh, and how about talking about arrogant pieces of garbage, scum crap? I forgot. What's that guy's name? No. The guy, the one that wants to assassinate Lindsey Graham wants to assassinate Putin. Wants to assassinate Putin. And again, here, another one. I gave you some of the headlines here. Did I give you? Here. Russian shells blanket Ukrainian capital and port city. Hey, Lindsey Graham, how about American shells blanket Afghan capital? How about American shells blanket Iraq capital? How about American shells blanket Libyan capital?
Now, he never met a war he didn't like, and he's bitter. And he manifested that bitterness yesterday and surprisingly stormed out of the confirmation hearings of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson to be appointed to the Supreme Court over a dispute over Afghanistan, which has nothing whatsoever to do with the Supreme Court. He got in a pissing contest with liberal Democrat Dick Durbin, and he stormed out of the hearing because Afghanistan is now being run by the Taliban. Afghanistan, on which George W. wasted $2 trillion borrowed American dollars.
Yeah, $2 trillion. The Iraq War, another couple of $1 trillion. Again, it was General Dwight D. Eisenhower, five-star general, Supreme Commander of the Allied Forces, warning the American people at his farewell address in January 1961 that the military-industrial complex was robbing the nation of the genius of the scientists, the sweat of the laborers, and the future of the children. And here we are. And today, the headline news in the Cartoon News Network, CNN, is that guy Buttigieg, another little piece of scum garbage, nothing of a boy, or maybe something, I don't know, a nothing. We're going to give $2.9 billion to cities to help rebuild their infrastructure. That's the headline. $2.9 billion. You just said almost $14 billion of more war equipment to Ukraine to fight a losing war and kill more people. And you're bragging about a lousy $2.9 billion? And you got a defense budget when you put the intelligence into it? No intelligence. What's over $1 trillion a year?
Right, and that's interesting you say when you put the intelligence in it, because even though the Constitution says no money shall be spent from the Treasury except as is publicly recorded, nobody knows what the intelligence budget is. Nobody knows how much money they spend. You've just estimated $250 billion, which brings the defense $750 billion up to $1 trillion. That's actually a pretty conservative and charitable estimate, Gerald. I shouldn't laugh because James Madison foresaw a lot of this by saying, hey, Congress, Mr. President, Madam President, you can't spend a nickel without reporting it. Try and find out what the CIA's budget is. You'll be pulling your hair out. You can't find it.
What are we going to do?
Someday the federal government will fall like an overripe apple. We'll break off into smaller republics. If you're in the Northeast where you and I are, it'll be the People's Republic of whatever. If you're in Texas or Florida, there'll be a lot more respect for personal liberty. I think that we need states to begin to nullify what the federal government has been doing. It's happening slowly, and maybe even secede. There's nothing that would wake up the federal government more than if parts of this country legally were no longer subject to it and financially no longer had to pay its bills.
You know, I had a dear friend, may he rest in peace. He died too young. His name was Thomas Naylor. Do you remember him?
I know the name, Gerald.
Thomas Naylor started the Second Vermont Republic.
Oh, yeah.
What a gentleman. What a kind man. He used to come up to, when we used to have rallies and things and parties, and a kind guy, and he was brilliant. He was born in Mississippi. He saw racism as a young kid, and professor emeritus at Duke University. And he was pushing for the secessionist movement in Vermont, and it was growing very strong.
Yes, it was.
And all of a sudden, boom, he died of unexpected whatever. And who knows? Now, we need a new, and I'm saying to everyone listening, we are on the verge of World War III. And the economy is this inflation is destroying the lives and livelihoods of people all around the world with these moronic sanctions that have been put on the people. And as you pointed out last week, these sanctions are illegal and they're criminal. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
No, you're not putting words in my mouth, but the Constitution protects persons, not just Americans. The federal government has seized property and frozen assets of persons. They happen to be Russians. Now the sanctions are interfering with American commercial enterprise. If you and I were importers of Russian vodka and we had paid the vodka manufacturers in Moscow, a couple $100,000 to ship the vodka here, the feds are seizing the vodka at Port Newark and sending it back. Well, that's prohibited by the Constitution, but that's what Joe Biden's doing, not by legislation, but by edict. It's profoundly unconstitutional. And do they work? Take a look at Cuba. We've had sanctions on Cuba since 1962. They still drive Chevys that were made in 56, and the government is as repressive as ever. Have the sanctions worked? Of course not. They never do.
No, they haven't worked with Iran. They haven't worked with Venezuela. They don't work. They only hurt the people. Judge,
Correct.
We need someone like you to be the leader of freedom, peace, and justice, because you are a man of freedom, a judge, I should say, of freedom, a man of peace, and you are really someone that knows about justice that very, very few know in detail about the Constitution, our rights, and what is being stolen from us and what we should get back. Thank you so much for being on. Everyone listening, what you're hearing, you're not hearing anywhere else. So thank you so much, Judge Andrew Napolitano. And everyone also think about donating to Occupy Peace. And that's occupypeace.com, because if we don't have peace, we're going to have hell on earth. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, Gerald. All the best.